Welcome to the Financial Dads Podcast with Paul Fagan and Jody Fisher. This is the podcast for all dads who want to succeed with life's topics, especially related to family and finances. Now here's my dad, Paul Fagan.
Hey Jody, how you doing today?
Hello Paul, how are you?
I'm doing well, fantastic. Before we jump into today's topic, why don't we'll continue with our coverage of different news stories, right? Timely news stories. I think people were receptive to that new feature within our podcast. So we're going to post a couple of links on the Facebook page, and we picked a couple of stories this week to talk about and maybe riff on a little bit. The first story is from USA Today. And Jody, the headline we both agree is kind of daunting, right? It says, "Why should you never depend on your partner for financial support?"
Oh, those headline writers.
Yeah.
They get us every time.
It was very harsh. But then once I started digging into the article, it was pretty sound advice. And I think we've talked about this in other podcasts. But, the whole thing about managing your money with your spouse, putting funds away, and making sure people have access to the monies and such. So I thought it was interesting. What are your thoughts on this, Jody?
Yeah, I think, the key in that headline is being dependent on someone else. I don't think anybody should be dependent on someone else for everything, unless you're in the habit of getting yourself a sugar mama or a sugar daddy, which I am definitely not. But in all seriousness, you can read the article. I think that any relationship, including a marriage relationship or a long-term partner relationship or money relationship, it's got to be codependent, maybe not the right word, but it's got to be 50-50. It's got to be equal, and that doesn't mean that both you're going to be making the same amount of money your entire marriage. Someone's always going to make more. We're going to be entering a phase where my wife is actually going to be making nothing in the next few months because she's going to be student teaching as part of her path to getting a teaching degree and then getting her full-time classroom. But that's a year away. So I think you got to sit down. I mean, that's what our whole podcast is about here, is sitting down and creating a budget and being on the same page with each other, and making decisions together. So I think you should be dependent upon each other in terms of making decisions together. But it all shouldn't be, one person's job to manage the money and the other person's job to just float through life.
No, I agree. I mean, I think you hit it on the head. I think there are two call-outs from the article that I never really, one I thought about and one we follow, can be disputed by some, and the other is very interesting. So the first one, it says put away funds in your own name. So I know a lot of couples commingle and everything goes into the single pot. I've talked about this on previous podcasts. Me and my wife do not do that. We do have a centralized pot for the home, but we maintain our separate accounts, which I guess gives us our financial, so to speak, independence, right? If you want to call it that. But it does psychologically allow us to manage our own monies. So I think that's, in our relationship, it's been healthy. The second point that I wanted to call out, where it says make plans to cope with one income. This is important, and at some point we probably should do a podcast about life insurance, the different types, how much you should have, all those different pieces, right? And at the end of the day, you really should think about that. And it's a hard one to think about, but what do you do, if you're down to one income? And that could be for a number of reasons, right? God forbid, the different D's of life, right? Death, divorce, dementia. There's all kinds of things, right? Health. So making plans to cope with one income is always important, right? So if one of your partners out there disappears, you have a game plan. So I thought that was kind of a good call out, something to think about. But maybe we'll talk about that in another podcast around life insurance and such and planning.
That would be a good one. I thought of that earlier this week. We'll definitely put that on the list for a future podcast.
Cool. Okay, great. Well, the second story I want to touch upon today, which was interesting, it was an article in Money Magazine, and it talks about Warren Buffett and experts kind of disputing some of his golden rules, right? So it's hard to...
How can you dispute Warren Buffett?
That's what I was about to say. How do you dispute this guy, right? The guy's a billionaire driving his Buick around town in the same house he's had for, 50 years, right? Or 40 years, whatever it is. But there are some interesting things in here that I've heard before. Some are new. The kind of the call out for me is say yes to things that scare you. I think for me that resonates highly. When it comes to my career, I'm all about that. I'm not afraid to try different things. I'm risk adverse in every aspect of my life, it seems, except for the career, that's probably for another podcast as well, or a psychiatrist. But for me, saying yes to things that scare me, I think it's smart. Over my career, I've gotten to learn different things, different technologies. I'm in the technology industry. I've been able to learn different things that if I had stayed put and not scared myself, maybe I'd still be staring at, Windows XP, right? And not knowing how to upgrade, for example. I don't know. But for me, saying yes to things that scare me is very important. And another one, which I don't do enough of, and that is saying yes to everything until you have the right to say no. So I usually say, so you know what? I take that back. That one doesn't resonate as much with me as limit yourself to 3 priorities. I think that one's pretty important. And there's another one around focus on 5 things and nothing else. And I think sometimes I get to a point where I have too many things on my plate, and then my energies get watered down. What's your opinion, Jody, of some of this advice that's in this article?
Yeah, this is a great article, and I think this is one of those articles that's going to resonate differently with because it mean different things to different people depending on how you read it. Kind of like the Peloton ad, people are going to see different things, and they're going to see what they want to see in this article. But the headline certainly resonated with me about the key to success, saying no. I think the more that you put on your plate, the less energy and resources you have to do all the things, taking care of the things that you put on your plate voluntarily. So saying no to saying no to the right things just as important as saying yes to the right things. Really, really important. And terrific advice in here. So I think people should just read it and let things resonate with them as they will.
Cool. I'll post those links to the Facebook page. We'd love your feedback, comments, questions. Please shoot them back to us on the Facebook page or via our email. So I guess now we'll jump into this week's topic, which is pretty interesting. I think someone said, is it a $10 billion, $20 billion industry? It might be higher. The weekly topic is going to be pets. And for us, our current situation is we've really had nothing more than a goldfish in the house or a hermit crab, I think. So in our household now, we don't have any pets to speak of. I remember when we got the goldfish, we won it at a carnival. Or my daughter or son won it at a carnival, and then we had to go buy the whole thing to house the goldfish. And he lasted quite some time. He lasted maybe 2 years, I believe. So he was well cared for, and we had him for quite some time, but nowhere near the work and rigor and cost that it takes to maintain a dog or a cat. Growing up, my brother had a rabbit for a while. We had a beautiful dog that lasted 17 years. I loved him. It was great. But lots of costs, lots of work. I remember one time, twice the dog got away from us, and we had to go running after him from street to street. And finally, in both cases, he went into someone's backyard, came out of the backyard, jumped in our car willingly, all of a sudden, stinking to high heaven. He got blasted by skunks, right? So we had to get him to the vet and get him cleaned and all these different things, right? So really for us in our life situation, and I love, like I said, I preface it, I love dogs, I love pets. It's the effort, the time, the cost, and sometimes it's the time, it's the stuff beyond the financial, but the financial is a huge part, right? So, and for me, if you're, there's all these, once again, we talk about hidden costs, pet sitting and boarding of the pet to go on vacation. And if you're not home during the day, getting someone to come in and walk your pet. There's all kinds of things, right, that are associated with pets. And so, Jody, what's your current situation when it comes to pets?
We have no pets in the house. We have enough smells around here. We have a 10-year-old boy, and I don't smell much better. No, I'm just kidding. growing up, I was a kid that had, I think I had like a hamster or two. There were some rabbits. There was definitely a dog at one point. Um, and so, definitely had animals around the house when I was growing up. And so that was part of, my formative years. When I was an adult, we have had a cat. The cat came with the girlfriend that became the wife. And she was a great cat. She was one of those cats that stayed a kitten until 3 days before she died. She was,
Oh boy.
just crazy, jumping around and having she was a good cat, but she was also a mush. She'd lay on your lap. All she wanted to do was snuggle and just be by you. She was never one of those little mischievous, like all cats I think are, but not like a terror cat. I mean, I've met terror cats. I've met cats that are like devil cats.
Yeah, most of them hiss at me.
Lock them in the basement and don't let them out kind of cat. You know what I mean? But this was a great cat. But the worst thing I could say about her is that she clawed the hell out of the furniture,
Right.
over her lifespan, and they all do, and that's one of the realities you got to weigh when you're getting a pet. What's the collateral damage that will be created by the animal simply because they are what they are. It's not their fault. It's just what they do. So we are petless at the moment. The kids are talking about, and I think I've been talking about since the day the cat died, either wanting to get a new cat or getting a dog, or what do we do? And so I've been trying to delay things as long as we can because I don't want to be the sole proprietor of this new animal that comes into our home. Because their commitments, like you said, Paul, it costs money, time, energy. You can't go into owning a pet lightly, and you certainly cannot impulse buy. And I don't think you should buy an animal. I know there are costs, like you got to go buy a fish or I don't know, something like that. But if you're going to get a dog or a cat, go to a shelter. If you feel like you need a designer pet, maybe you should get a handbag instead. That's just I don't mean that to sound rude. Well, maybe a little bit. But seriously, a pet is an emotional investment. Yes, it's a money and time investment, but it's an emotional investment more than anything else. And I think if you're going to welcome a pet into your home, you should be emotionally invested in this animal, and you should just go to a shelter and get a dog or a cat. And because this also becomes, even though this is a living thing and should not be treated lightly, it is an opportunity to teach kids about responsibility and how to care for a living thing, something other than themselves. And this living thing needs food, and it needs water, it needs attention, it needs to be walked. And, as I say to my kids, who's going to pick up the poop? I'm not going to be the only one doing it. So we're in that space right now where we're talking about it. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon.
Yeah, I think for us, my kids would love a dog. They've talked about it a number of times. Once again, I go back to the financial commitment, which is not as daunting as the time commitment. I remember going back home to visit my parents. And of course, exactly what you talked about, exactly is what happened in my household growing up. So the dog was purchased for me and my brother, and my mother wound up being the primary caregiver for that pet, right? And so she loved the dog dearly, but it wound up being her dog at the end of the day. We loved the dog. We played with the dog. We did our, I'm not even going to say fair share of chores for the dog, because we didn't. We walked the dog. But even when I was coming home from college and the dog was there, the first thing the dog would do is he would run into the kitchen and grab his leash off the counter with his mouth and bring it to me. Like, that was his thing. Like, he was a big dog. He loved to get outside. He loved the cold, which I'm not a huge cold lover, right? So
no, thank you.
It was very a lot of time and financial. I remember over the years between the skunk sprays and my parents, they did a great job raising me and my brother. But financially, we probably shouldn't have had a dog, but we did. But it's a lot of money, right? Vet bills, and God forbid, I think at one point he had something that maybe was, $1,000, right, to fix. And of course, my mother insisted we get him fit. We get him fixed, and I don't mean fixed like spayed or neutered. I'm just saying, he had a problem, medical problem, and we fixed it. But my father, his attitude, he loved the dog, but if it was over a certain threshold, he was like, we're going to take this pet for a ride, right? Which is, I'm not suggesting to anybody, and I think he joked about it half the time. But for the most part, the pets are a big responsibility, and they're a lot of money, and they're a lot of time, and you really have to be a pet owner that is aware and go in with your eyes wide open. So maybe we'll go into some of these discussion topics that we've thought about, right? So the cost of owning a pet, right? So you get the pet. And I remember someone in business once, had a line that said, "It's not like giving me a free beer; it's giving me a free puppy." So a lot of times you see the commercials, and the aunt or the uncle or the grandparents, they bring a puppy to someone's house, and for the kids. And man, thank God that's never happened to me. But it
a toddler kept up on Twizzlers. Red
absolutely.
Dye. Give them red dye. Yeah. They'll be hanging from the ceiling.
Absolutely. So, but that cost of owning that pet, which we talked about, you have to feed it, you have to get the accessories, you have to go to the vet, you have to pay for dog sitters, boarding when you're on vacation, new furniture. What are your thoughts when it comes to the costs of owning a pet?
I think if you want to try to anticipate the costs of owning a pet, the first thing you should do is walk through one of those big box pet stores and look at all the stuff that they've got on those shelves that you will buy sooner or later associated with the animal that you want to get. And it looks really cool. Just start adding that stuff up, man. It's in the thousands, tens of thousands of dollars over the lifetime of any pet, right? Depending on and that's fine if you want to do it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not dumping on spending money on a pet. Quite the opposite. I think if you're going to go in on a pet, you need to go in on the financial commitment of owning the pet. What you can't do is get the pet and then go, it's not for me, and then dump them off in a shelter somewhere, or whatever. You've got to go all in on the pet. You've also got to have, I think, a comfort level other than the financial. Maybe we'll get into this too. You got to have a comfort level with the kind of pet you're getting. I mean, we have a no lizard, no reptile policy.
Yeah, we have a no snake policy in our house.
There will not be anything that I don't want in my bed in this house.
That's a good rule of thumb.
Okay. If it can't come in my bed, it's not coming in the house. So that basically brings it down to, dog, cat, and fish. And the fish obviously stays in the bowl or in the tank. But even a you mentioned a goldfish before, Paul. I mean, you can get a goldfish and put it in a bowl, and okay, great. You get some, sprinkle food in there, and I guess it's all good. You could spend tens of thousands of dollars on exotic fish, and even not that crazy fish. Taking care of it, you gotta empty the tank out I don't even know how many months, clean that thing up. I always think of not Finding Dory. What was it? Finding Nemo, and how they stunk up the tank to get out of the tank. You got to clean that tank, man, and that takes time and energy and money. Walk through a big box pet store. You'll figure out how much you got to spend on that pet.
Yeah, and I think you hit something on the head in the conversation, and that's really around maybe picking the right pet, but maybe picking the right pet for your lifestyle. Right? So if you're not a dog walker, maybe you need to get a small dog. That's more of that trains in the house on wee-wee pads, goes out occasionally, right? That's small enough to kind of survive in a house or an apartment. If you get a huge dog, I'm talking like 50 pounds or more, that dog's not going to be happy, probably, in an apartment all day by himself or herself. So, these are the kind of things to think about. A cat, another great option. A lot of people have cats, and, generally, you have an indoor cat versus an outdoor cat, so you might want a cat that just stays inside, right? And then there are friends of mine I have a lot of friends that have pets, and they have multiple pets because they don't want the pets to be by themselves. And when you think about it, it's a pretty fair statement, right? If you get one cat and you're gone all day, that cat is by his or herself. And then, so it may be smart to get a second pet where they have a pal to hang out with and scheme or whatever they do when you're not around, right? But,
they drink whiskey.
That's
they
it.
Sit at home and they drink whiskey.
That's true. You ever see The Life of Pets, right? That movie. So,
Great stuff.
yeah. So, I think we'll switch gears here, and there's another interesting topic, and that's pet insurance. I had a friend of mine, a colleague at one of my old jobs. He had bought pet insurance, which I thought was kind of a crazy idea, but then he had bought pet insurance for his dog, and like lo and behold, like the dog had a catastrophic illness that needed to be treated, and the pet insurance covered it. And I'm talking tens of thousands of dollars for that this pet was sick and needed veterinarian care and treatments, and they went through like a 6 to 9 month ordeal, and the pet survived. But without the pet insurance, man, that is a tough decision. Do you spend $20,000 on your pet? And there are some people out there, and this could really raise the level of email and feedback, but some people say there is no money that I'll not spend on my pet, right? It's limitless, right? Where others will say, look, it's a pet, I love you, but if our financial well-being is in jeopardy, we're not going to be able to get the pet the treatment that it needs. What are your thoughts when it comes to pet insurance and getting it, and dealing with the fact that if your pet gets sick to the point where you're going to have to spend a ton of money to have the pet get better, how do you make that decision?
I don't think you're allowed to do that. I mean, I think this is a living thing, and I think the argument is easiest made with something like a dog or a cat, right? But animals get medical problems. They're living things. They have medical problems. And if you're going to get the pet, you need to go in on the medical upkeep of that living thing. It's a living thing. It's not a toy. It's not fun, which is why, I say Santa Claus doesn't bring pets. They're living things. They become part of your family. And we can joke all we want about, the crazy cat lady, thing, or the person who calls their pet their children or whatever. But, I'm not equating animals and children, but they do become part of your family. They are a living thing, and you cannot say, $3,000 is too much to get Fido's leg fixed. Let's just put him down. That is completely irresponsible. It's ridiculous. And I'm getting a little up here because I'm not that much of like an animal rights person. But I do think that when you're going in on a pet, especially if we're talking about, kids and the example you're setting for your kids, you can't go in casually on a pet. You've got to be all in on the care, maintenance, upkeep, and medical checkups and medical maintenance of this living, breathing thing that is in your house. You don't get a pass on taking care of this animal just because it's a little too expensive.
No, agreed. I think this is one of those things, and I'm gonna tread lightly here because this might be our first controversial podcast. So what is that number though, Jody? And I guess that's something. So you said $3,000, which it sounds like
I made that up.
Yeah, no.
I made that up.
But I guess saying, if you had and this is a tough decision. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but you have a pet. He's been with you 10 years in the family. He's a family pet, and you find out that he's sick. He or she is sick and needs treatment, and that treatment costs $5,000. And you're in the same financial boat that you're in now. Do you spend that $5,000?
I think you have a moral obligation to do that. You got the pet in the first place. Would you do that to your kid?
Okay, $10,000.
Right? You have a moral obligation. You voluntarily brought that pet into your house.
$20,000.
You have a moral obligation. It doesn't go gray for me. It doesn't. Yeah,
go gray for me. Yeah, I just was trying to figure like at some point, like when is it? I'm trying to. That's why it was controversial, and I don't want to. I don't want to get too deep into it, but is there a ceiling where the treatment is $30,000, $50,000? I don't know what it is, right? Because I'm hoping that's the worst case scenario. But is that something that you spend the $50,000?
Well, and that's why I go so hard on resisting the simplistic urge to bring the pet into the house. In addition to not wanting to repeat what we had with the other cat, clawing the furniture. and just sort of wrecking everything that's in their path. I feel maybe this isn't for everybody, but it certainly is for me. I feel a moral obligation and an ethical obligation to take care of this animal that's coming into my house, regardless of what happens. There does not, for me, there is no threshold at which it becomes, oh, it's just too expensive or too inconvenient or blah, blah, blah. You are obligated to do it. You stepped up. You volunteered for the job. You've got to see it through all the way.
Very cool. I think you might have turned my opinion around, Jody. So I'll leave it at that.
And I'm big disclaimer. That's not what everybody thinks.
Yeah.
And I'm not here to try to convert people into thinking. It's funny. We suggested this topic, Paul. I didn't think we were going to go here, but I'm not saying that the way I think is the way everybody should think. But it's certainly. But I feel very strongly about that. That you can't. Because it goes back to what I said about designer pets. Like if you feel like you need just the perfect little Chihuahua, I'm thinking of what's the Legally Blonde, carrying the Chihuahua around in the bag. And you see these people around all the time. If you need a designer pet, just go get an iPad or get a handbag or get something. Get a pair of shoes or something.
No, I think yep. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think that this really highlights, if anything, the money and time commitment and the cost. So you have to be ready for the cost of that pet to typically have no ceiling, right? So anything could happen, right? And I know I was overdoing it with these scenarios, and hopefully no one's ever put into that position. But it does open your eyes to the fact that these pets are very expensive. Like I said, my friend, the cost of his dog's treatment was $20,000 plus, and this was back in 2002. And he had the pet insurance. He didn't have to make any decisions, right? So, but it's a big commitment, right? So, to your point, if you have, just make sure you understand that, like you said, the dog, the cat, they're all living things, right? You're gonna have to, if you're making that commitment, be prepared for a lot of these different costs and unforeseen costs that might be there along the way. Just like with a human, get sick, pets get sick, and just be ready for that consequence. So I'm going to flip the gears again, and maybe we'll talk about training the pet, right? I know that our dog, we got him to sit, stay, not so much stay, but sit, give the paw. That was about it, right? But I know that there could be a large investment being made by people into training the pet. And there's a cost to it. There's a time commitment. What is your thoughts in terms of training the pet? I guess it's more for dogs, right? Cats, you don't really train them.
You can't train a cat.
Yeah, you kind of train them to go in a litter box, right? But dogs, you can kind of train them.
The cat does what the cat wants to do.
Yeah. Yeah, my grandmother had a cat once. Every time she got out of bed, if she made a left to go to the bathroom, he'd bite her ankles because he wanted her to make a right to go to the kitchen to feed him.
There you go.
Cats do have their own way,
It's so funny.
And
I was not a cat person before I met my wife, and I just fell in love with that cat. She was just so funny and such a pain in the butt, and she was a great cat. Training. I mean, I think that goes to, there's a financial commitment there, but I think that goes more to the emotional commitment, and that's where we start to get into the place where we talked about before, of using this as a teaching opportunity for your kids as well. The kids have to take part in the training. These are living things, like we said, and therefore they do their own thing, and you have to train them to do the things you want them to do, to not go to the bathroom on your living room rug or whatever else that is. So it's the walking, and it's the the obedience, and the whatever that stuff is. You've got to do that. If it comes as part of the pet, in part of the DNA of the pet, you've got to go in on that, and you've got to go in on that on all levels.
Yeah, agreed. And I think that kind of comes to the one of the other topics around we talked about hidden cost of home ownership, hidden cost of pets, and not just the food and the leashes or the litter boxes, but the hidden costs of pets will be pets. Clawing of the furniture, gnawing of the tables. If you have nice stuff in the house and you have a pet, be prepared for that nice stuff not to be so nice, potentially. So what are some of the other hidden costs that you could think of, that if you bought the pet beyond the leash and the food and the veterinarian bills, what other costs do you think are kind of hidden there below the surface?
I think the biggest hidden cost will probably be in your time and your emotional commitment to this animal. Like I said, when I met my wife, she had the cat. She was, I didn't like cats. I was like, oh, cat, you really? This cat became the most amazing little buddy that I've ever had in terms of a pet. She was awesome. You get very emotionally attached to these animals. They're kind of like, and nobody jump up and down. I'm not equating children and pets. Absolutely not. But they have the same kind of an emotional impact on you in that they do things and they become, they occupy a part of your personality and your emotional spectrum that becomes all theirs, and they define that little piece of real estate in your life, and they don't let it go, and eventually they leave, and so you need to watch out for that thing sneaking up on you. I did not anticipate how much she would have that cat would have that impacted me, and how much I missed her when she was gone. So I think that's the biggest hidden cost of owning a pet.
Yeah, I agree. I had my childhood dog. I cried like a baby when he left this earth, and he was wonderful, But it's funny, to kind of end the podcast on a high note, we talked about a mutual friend of ours. Can you imagine this conversation with him when it comes to the value of time and a pet? He'll never own a pet.
Yeah.
Right?
It'll get him a fish.
I'd be shocked if he ever got a pet. Maybe if we antagonize him enough, he'll join the podcast. But yeah, he'll never, when it comes to time commitment, the pet will eat a lot of your time, right? But it's a good thing. And I think all in all, to kind of go into a little bit of a recap here, after everything we've said, pets are great. They're so cool. I would love to have one. My circumstances don't allow me at this point in time to have one again, but they are great. So dog, cat, hamster, gerbil, cockatoo, guinea pigs, whatever your thing is, right? Saltwater fish, right? Whatever that is, pets are awesome, right? But just make sure you're prepared for all the costs, both financial and time, associated with your pets. And then Jody, what's your takeaway from today?
Fully agreed. I think a pet is just like any other thing that you're going to bring into your life. Be sure that you're bringing it in for the right reasons. Be ready for both the financial and the emotional commitment that you have to the pets. And remember that they are not disposable. They are living, breathing things that you need to commit to on all levels when you do bring them in, and you gotta run it all the way through.
Very cool. Very well put. Well, Jody, I thoroughly enjoyed our discussion today, and I'm personally looking forward to the next one. Thanks, everyone, for downloading our podcast. If you have any questions or comments, please email us at financialdads@gmail.com or check us out on Facebook. Just go to financialdads.com. So with that, this is Paul and Jody reminding you, managing finances can be stressful, but that's why the Financial Dads are here to help you plan for success. Have a good one, everybody. Be well, and thank you.